Go back to where you were. Understand that your past and some of the moments and places and people really have shaped who you are. Good or bad, it's to acknowledge that.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a former professional baseball player, now speaking, coaching, and changing the world through helping others create meaningful connections. Please welcome to the Elevate podcast, Charlie Ruiz. Charlie, how are we doing today?
Man, I'm wonderful. It's December. Holidays are here. Can't complain.
Yeah, I know. I know one of the things we were just talking about, following each other a little bit and kind of connecting. But I know you like to run. I see you post some runs. I'm a runner, so let's start. Did you get a run in today, or you still got that to do?
Still on the to-do and in preparation for my first marathon, which is probably why you've seen
Okay.
more running as of recent, because it used to be a punishment. Now I'm starting to kind of enjoy it a bit.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, you came from the baseball world where it's, 90 feet at a time running, kind of thing. So, moving to a marathon, that's pumped. We'll have to come back to that. But to give our audience a little bit more about you, could you tell them a little bit about kind of, I guess, what led you to the work you do now as a coach and part of your athletic journey, and just kind of what led you to what you're doing now and why we're talking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So kind of an unconventional kind of path or story. Part of the work that I do now, whether it's working with executives or now also working back into working with athletes, whether it's Olympians, some Pro Bowl guys, some MLB coaches, and kind of figuring out what this lane looks like now, is the fact that I did have an unconventional path, and the mindset, some of the mental performance work that I did to perform as an athlete, all truly centered around me committing to the mindset work back in junior college. So now that I see that it also translates in business, it kind of just merges my world of communication and sport. And the mind is a big part of that.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that pops out when you look up, and we'll have Charlie's stuff linked up here, is tell us a little bit more about CLR connection. And I think I'm fascinated by connection. I'd love to hear you kind of speak about that and how you kind of bring that into your work.
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about what I want to bring to, the market, if you will, it really centers around connection. So as a leader, both as an individual and for teams, it's how can I make sure I'm connecting to my mind first, the most important muscle we have that we need to work on. And I got that from sport. And then how are we also connecting to our teams through the words, right? The words and the way that we show up that also fits into actions. I think that's important, whether you're managing a team of 2 or a team of 100, right? The words and the actions matter. And then the identity thing, which is the third kind of pillar of my business. It's, you got to know who you are. And part of knowing who you are is to embrace all facets of the wins and losses from your past, to acknowledge where and how that shows up in today's world. So I do a lot of work with athletes in particular around identity and making sure that they still know who they are when they find their new career, post-retirement.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that that was something I struggled with. I think, I had played college football, ended up in the business side of Major League Baseball. I worked in the front office of the White Sox years ago. And but yeah, it was a different, I struggled with that kind of a few years removed of, man, where's my teammates at? I hop on the train, there's no fist bumps, no good day, no strangers telling you congrats, hey, great day, and it became a very different world. And I think even, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about kind of those past knowing yourself, because I think that was a moment where I had to kind of go back and understand myself. I think even in a point I'm in my life right now, it's got to kind of come back and know yourself. And sometimes that takes that reflective piece, because we get so moving in this world. Can you talk about maybe how we can slow down and reflect and get to know ourselves better?
How can we slow down and get to know ourselves? It's actually very timely. That's what's inspiring my marathon. And I haven't really told many people this, but the marathon I'm running is in honor of that, particularly the identity space. Go back to where you were. Understand that your past and some of the moments and places and people really have shaped who you are, good or bad. It's to acknowledge that. So what inspired me to run this marathon that I've just mapped out around my neighborhood in San Leandro, Oakland area, is I'm going back to all the elementary schools, baseball fields, little league fields, high schools, junior college, and I'm running, and I'm going to be stopping, not during the marathon, but as I've been training, to acknowledge what that place did for me. Right? The years in my junior college, what did I learn there?
Yeah.
The 1 year at my high school as a freshman where I got cut and didn't even make the baseball team. It's acknowledging those spaces and places by actually going back there and asking yourself, like, how is this shaping up or showing up in my today's world? So I think that that's a huge part for an athlete to figure out. And sometimes it takes you 10 years. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 people to help guide you through that process.
Yeah.
It's about giving yourself that space. And I don't think we do as athletes, because we know we have to go forward, and we do.
Right.
But there's also some gold there hanging out in the back of our past that we need to kind of pick up and take with us.
Yeah, no, I love that. You talk about also, in that connection. Talk to athletes, when we show we can care, then we can connect, and then maybe we can get to that larger commitment we want from each other. Can you talk about, maybe what you see? I always talk about care, but what precedes and can help us create some really meaningful connections?
How do we connect as an athlete, as a human? Well, first ask yourself, like, are you actually being present in that exact moment with that person that's in front of you? I think a lot of the times we have so much that we're thinking about, so much that we have to do, whether it's in school, work, right? You're raising a family, whatever it is, we have all this stuff to be able to do. Connection starts inward. Where am I at? Where are my feet? And how am I engaging in listening? Not to respond, but to understand, to create space for someone when you say, hey, how are you? And then they respond with, I'm good. Well, that's not good, right? To be able to pause and say, what's really going on?
Yeah.
I think connection starts with, are you creating the space and truly present? And then from there, are you actually trying to, connect the dots and understand where somebody's coming from, so you connect to them on a deeper level? A lot of that starts with listening.
Listening is really a gateway to so many other things. And I think it's, I find out in our journeys, it's always a skill you got to keep working on. You don't master it at any age. I think it only gets more challenging with the things that vie for our attention and want our listening. Can you talk about, as an athlete, maybe how did you filter out some of the noise and distractions from seeping in?
How did I filter? How did I filter out noise? I think for me, it was getting very clear on not just my mission, but how I wanted to show up for myself, and realizing that all of the other pieces, it sounds very selfish in a way, as someone who was always of service even back then, there's a lot of noise out there. What do I need to do so I can perform at my best, which is going to allow me to be the best teammate, which is going to allow me to be the best friend, right? In today's world, colleague. I need to take care of me first. So am I very clear on my mission in the morning, my routines, my habits, my mindset, so that I can execute that and then help execute with my team? But if I'm trying to always do all the other things for everyone else and I'm not getting my reps in, it's never going to work out that way.
Sure.
There's this self-interest that any athlete should have, and that doesn't go away. At least I don't think it should.
Yeah. And too, with your past teammates, you had I'm sure a lot of them, were there some connections for you that really stood out, whether they maybe fulfilled a mentor role or the relationship, or were there some connections that you're really grateful for as you reflect back, and maybe you're on these runs that they come up?
I'm preparing to definitely get a bit emotional on how much of that I think has influenced how I show up today. I think the connection to my teammates and relationships I have is probably what I hold most dearest to my heart when I think of the game and what it did for me, what it continues to do for me. just off the top, right? It's some of those former teammates that are now coming back into my spaces, collaborate or to be a partner with on a specific project. Whether it's, you don't see it, but there's a picture of one of my old dear teammates who's a hero of mine, right? He passed away to cancer years back, but he was the 8th inning guy. I was the 9th inning guy, and he was my brother. And a lot of how I show up and why I do what I do is because of how powerful that bond was. And we get that through connecting, especially in baseball, when it's a 3-hour game, you're sitting in the bullpen for 2.5 hours of it, listening and talking to your boys.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a great quote the other day. Someone said, I don't know where coach it came from, but it said, are you playing with your teammates? Are you playing for your teammates? And which team would you want to be on?
Man, that's such a good quote, and something to ponder, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to play for, yeah, I'm with them, but there's something else that can ignite you when you're doing it for your guys.
Yeah.
And I think that bond and that commitment is what will stand the test of time.
Yeah, no doubt.
It is that guy on the bench, right? Or that guy who isn't starting.
Yeah.
Who comes out and is the first to give you depth when you're off the field. Yeah. Those are the ones. And on the reverse end, me too, right? Yeah. I'm pitching the 8th or 9th inning.
Yeah.
I better be there and be up for my starter and all my guys from start to finish, because this is a collective. Yeah. And being a good teammate is my number one rule. That's what I tell my daughter every day she goes to soccer.
Can you talk about, and a lot of listeners are young student athletes and people that coach them, and you're talking about how this level of connection and relationships you had, and the encouragement, and even how adapt meant something to you at the highest levels. But can you talk about and maybe there's misunderstandings that young athletes don't understand, but how, from your experience, the difference is when you have these high connected teams versus teams that maybe aren't connected, and what that creates as far as experience and performance?
Yeah. So how does those small kind of details and important kind of pieces of building a culture?
Yeah. Sometimes these young athletes be like, does that really mean anything? They're, that he's talking about adapt and this, and he's a closer. Like, does he need that?
And the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
When I think of the attention to details from a coach perspective, you're a high school athlete, you're a college athlete, there's intentional curation of the poster that's in the office, right? You setting the team to go, the A and B team, right? The black and gold team. That is all intentionally created. So details matter. And if I know, right, that I'm on one specific team, there may be a reason for that. So the details of being able to guide or support or mentor or help lift one of my teammates up, that's actually why I'm there on that team.
Right.
So so the details do matter, and the teammate piece, I think, is the one thing that is going to be this. It's the standing number one important thing that you can control. Yeah. It's how to be a good teammate.
Yeah.
And that helps your performance.
Talk more about that. So I think even there's that underlying psychology, that when you're, service and you're helping others, it's coming from a space, where sometimes I think student athletes, they like this rivalry. Let's hate the other team, and you don't perform well when you're operating from that space. It might be good for the posters and the media and the cheerleading, but talk more about how performing, from a optimum space where you're about other people helps you.
I think the highest performers of the world in sports, right? This takes me back to my junior college. It is that nameless, faceless. I remember that my junior college coach would always say nameless, faceless. And, I think it's come from other college coaches as well. In addition to him, I think it may have been like an Augie Garrido thing, where nameless faces, I don't care who's on the other end of the court, the field, right? We are playing a game against us. And if we are doing that, and we can commit to handling what is right in front of us, including being a good teammate, no matter what happens at the end of the game, we've got to be good with it. But if we get caught into the noise of the other team, right, the chirping, the newspaper article, all the hype, we've already lost the game.
Yeah.
Control, right? The control, the controllables for me, how I operate and how I continue to operate. It's what's in front of me in this exact moment. The competitor or the team on the other end, they're nameless and faceless. This is a you versus you game. And part of the you versus you game is being a good teammate.
Another thing, especially athletes as they grow, and baseball is so centered around some statistics of a failure, so to speak, for lack of better words. But was there something that you used as a tool to either reset after adversity or just reset after every pitch? Was there some sort of thing that you went to that gave you that kind of comfort in your routine?
Yes. So what did I do to reset within my routine? Two-prong. I got introduced to sports psychology when I was in my junior college days, right, with my coach, Steve Friend, back at Chabot in Hayward, California. And we would talk a lot about routine and consistency as far as kind of the prep and the practice and how it all translated into game. And I loved it. I abided by it, and it kind of helped me perform at a level that I didn't really realize I was performing at. And then I go to Long Beach State, and I find myself sitting in the dugout with like the godfather of sports psychology, Ken Ruiz.
Yeah.
And as I'm sitting there with Ken in the dugout, we're talking about being able to, flush out, the negative and focus on the red lights and the green lights and the signal lights that allow you to perform. Man, I love that concept. And I'm not a big guy. I'm, 6'1", 185. I used to say 6'2" with cleats on. But what allowed me to perform was the signal lights. Yeah. I'm in control. I'm in flow. Keep rocking. My yellow routine and my red routine, people would think you're crazy. You're a closer. Good, right? I'm talking to myself. I'm using the positive affirmations. I have these small words that I would use where I'd speak myself into existence of what I wanted to do. That's what I was doing out there. And then next thing you know, you're getting, signed in the 10th round. Yeah. I equate that to the work, and the mindset work is part of it.
I'm glad you're one of, we've had about 150 guests on this show. There's only a few that got some, time with the Godfather Ken, as I would say. And a couple of them were early guests on this podcast. So, a little bit about him, because as someone I always had a great respect for, and still, I mean, using signal lights that with student athletes still to help them understand, where we're at. What other things do you remember about Ken that just had an impact? There's always sayings that people that are stuck in their head from Ken, especially if I'm guessing you sat in the dugout, you heard a lot of those.
Yeah. What sayings, or when I think about Ken, what do I think about?
Yeah.
I think about presence more than anything. And I think just because it resonates with how my work shows up today, being present, as we kind of started our conversation today, and how important that was for Ken when we talk about, right, the most important place for you to be is the place where you're at this moment, right? Be where your feet are. Like that saying to me really stands out with Ken, but also all of the other like random Revisa-isms and like the voice and I say this endearingly, right? The weird kind of quirkiness that was him. When I think about that as a coach, as a doctor, like as the mind he had, there was this authentic part of Ken that I loved, that I look at now, and I'm like, what made Ken so great? It was his authenticity. It was the fact that this was his, he was owning it. And I still get texts from my dirtbag teammates. Dirtbags was the name of the team.
Right.
We're throwing Revisa-isms out because you remember it was his. Yeah. It wasn't rinse and repeated and replicated in a way that didn't feel authentic to him. And I love that part of this work. We all know this. You can pick up a book and read all these skills. But how do you make it yours and then connect that with the person that's across from you?
For sure. I definitely remember, I think one of our guests, doing his Ken imitation of, if you can't control your performance, if you can't control yourself.
That's it.
Like, I never met him, but I've heard, been blessed to,
good.
Good. I did listen to a lot of them, years ago. So, but I guess, it's the image and presence that people remember about him. So I'm glad we could tangent on Ken a little bit. If you could go into a little DeLorean time machine and go back and visit, 16, 17-year-old Charlie out at one of those ball fields, and you give a little piece of advice, what's the one thing you'd want to go back and maybe tell teenage self?
Mhm. What would I tell teenage self? 16, 17-year-old Charlie, maybe senior, junior, senior year Charlie, to be patient and persistent.
Mm,
And I know that's it's what you call it, maybe a walking contradiction of words, but that's what I love about it. You want it all now.
yeah,
You want it all now. But there's this something along the lines of just doing some of those daily tasks and being patient with them every single day that I think allows you to get to where you need to be at. And when you're young and you're junior, senior year, you want it all now,
yeah.
especially when it comes to sport, especially when it comes to some of these shiny objects that come to us. I'd say be patient. It'll come, but just make sure that you're also being persistent in the right areas. And that also includes your relationships with your family, with your friends, with yourself. That I think we can get caught up in all the other noise. That the persistence also comes with you taking care of yourself.
I like that you, especially with our audience, emphasize the yourself there. I find that a lot of teenagers and college athletes, the world and the messaging they get is, and you've probably experienced some of this too, is that they need to have it figured out of who they exactly are when they're 16, 17, 22. Can you talk about a little bit about just the normalcy of that we're going to evolve, and it's okay to kind of, you don't have to have yourself figured out at 17, and if you do, that's probably not exactly who you're going to be. But kids, I feel this pressure, they have to have it all figured out, but then there's this other side that we're talking about, that it's like, no, know yourself and evolve and grow and connect and grow. Can you talk just a little bit about kind of that tough spot sometimes athletes are in, trying to know
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah. How to know yourself, or how to get to know yourself a bit outside of say sport. Just turned, I'm 35, coming on 36. I still can't tell you I know exactly.
Yeah.
Again, walking the marathon, right? I'm going to go sit with it. So if I'm 16, 17 years old and I'm told I need to have all this figured out, if I were to look back and also offer them something, it's the thing that you need to figure out is how to just be open enough to be uh, to learn, right? To understand maybe there is something else for me to kind of lean into or
Yeah.
embrace or understand that I don't know, and that's okay. Like it's okay to not understand. That's part of the whole mission. I think walking with an open heart, open hands, and seeing what are the opportunities for me to get better. As long as the mindset is like, how can I get better, and understand that this is a growth journey. That is the most important thing you can do as a 17-year-old and hell as a 40-year-old.
With you,
Open,
for sure.
open heart, open hand. Like
Yeah.
that is the message. And
Yeah.
from there, the relationships, the coaches, the skills, you'll start to say, okay, this is where I need to be putting my energy. But let me continue to be open and learn.
Follow up. How can we do that? Be open. Maybe we're being vulnerable and
Yeah.
continue to do that when maybe we feel like it has burnt us or not served us in the past. But we know, knowing ourselves, being true to ourselves, we still need to do that. But how do we keep doing that when, I think, as all of us, at some time we feel a little burnt by being open or vulnerable, especially in a sports environment? If you tell a coach, I'm feeling this way, and they're like, oh, you're damaged goods, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Hard. How to continue to be open and vulnerable, in especially in a sport, in a competitive way. By also seeking counsel outside of your immediate circle.
yeah, yeah,
It's not to find somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear.
yeah.
You get diversity of thought that can then influence how you show up and maybe open your eyes into a different way to learn.
Yeah.
I think that in sport, you know, you have your coaching staff. You might have your dad, your mom, your uncle. They obviously love you, you know, to where they're going to give you maybe one type of advice or feedback.
Sure.
But if I can go seek counsel and talk to a friend or a different sport, somebody outside of I might learn something new. And if it means that is somebody that I can go be vulnerable to and just tell them unbiased opinion, they don't even know my sport, but they listen to me, they create space. That's a great way to go do it, where it may not burn you, but it's still giving you the chance to kind of speak it into existence and learn from it.
Love it. Was there a coach that sticks out that had a greater impact on you than maybe some others in some way? I know we brought up Dugout Ken, but was there another coach in your career that kind of, you know, had a good impact on you as a human?
Yeah, I think of two coaches. One being my junior college head coach, Steve Fran. I mentioned him earlier. At the time, right, he would ride us, and he had his methods and his approach. He had been at the junior college for a couple of decades. When I look at what he was introducing to me and us, it was obviously to become men in a different way, but it was that emphasis of the mind and the sports psychology side of it. I didn't look at that until later to really say, wait a second. Now I see what he was doing. And I still don't know, but I just have such an affinity to say the number one thing is that I know that he had my back. I could pick up the phone and call him right now. Right? My little brother has. And I think that is the definition of a coach. It's not transactional, it's transformational. And we know that by me being able to pick up the phone 15, 20 years later and call him and know that he'll respond. That's beautiful.
For sure. That's the best.
And I feel the same way with my pitching coach for the Rockies. He's now the actual pitching coach for the Rockies, Daryl Scott. When I signed for my first year of pro ball, he was our pitching coach. The best part about D. Scott is that I walk in and he's like, look, you know, you signed in the 10th round, you've got a skill set. I want you to leverage that skill set. I'll guide, I'll shift. You got me when you need me, but I trust you. Go execute, go do your thing. To me, when you're ready, I'm observing first. And I love that part of it because when I was ready to go to him, he was quite literally my archetype too. Right-handed pitcher, 88 to 90, split, not going to overpower you, but you're going to throw a strike and you're going to get guys out.
Yeah.
I went to him and he became a mentor, and I still talk to him. I hold him in such a high regard for how he shows up for his guys, even in today's game.
I think that's, you know, such a sometimes contradiction what a lot of maybe young high school baseball coaches they would take. You know, they always sometimes want to teach so fast, you know, instead of, you know, observe and then teach.
That's it.
And I think that's it's good for coaches to hear. Sometimes it's okay to just observe and then allow some space and then create that teaching opportunity that's probably going to be a bit more enriched.
Absolutely. And allow you to find and meet them where they need to be. And it's the same working with executives when you get later. It's the same. We're speaking the same language.
Sure. One last question as we wind down here. You know, I feel your energy and passion and man, like just love how much you emphasize getting to know yourself and the importance of that and how that translates to external being a great teammate. But in your work and what you're doing now with executives, athletes, and everything, where do you find the most joy in your work?
Where do I find the most joy? I think in that text message or that update that they get feedback or recognition from somebody else based on the work that they've done. Right. I think that it's not right because it's not me. This is a big thing that I struggle with is in corporate or in tech. they'll say, what is some ROI? Like, what are your
Mm.
proof points? And I'm like, I struggle with being able to say this person sold this or achieved this because of me. They achieved it because of them. So when I get a text message from from somebody that I'm working with, I got a text message from a client that it's like, hey, I know we work on all of this communication, all of these performance and calendaring and time blocking. Through this process, he ended up locking in and committing to running down 100 pounds.
Awesome.
Right. And then I say, what was your biggest win? What was the unexpected win? He's like, well, me going back to visit my parents, and then visiting my parents and the landlord coming in and introducing himself to me as if he had no idea who I was. Right. It's those stories of them getting the recognition that they damn well deserve from somebody else because they put in the work. I love getting those text messages.